Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of our series on the German tax system. This episode will cover the German tax classes and allowances. It will be in two parts, and we will discuss the tax classes in part 1 and the allowances associated with income taxation in Germany in part 2. My goal is to keep the explanation simple and short, but with enough detail to make it understandable. I want us to get to the point where you feel confident and comfortable enough to try to file your annual taxes and also do it yourself. Naturally, there are certain points and details I may miss or for which my explanation may not be detailed or clear enough. Let's use the opportunity of the comments section to then ask further questions and discuss with each other. Through the first two episodes of this series, we have covered the general history, development, and current nature of income taxation in Germany. We have also looked at the various types of income taxes. We have looked at the tax rates associated with them and the various expenses allowed to be deducted from income tax before taxes are calculated. In this episode, like I have said, we will cover the tax class structure peculiar to the German tax system, the reason for the structure, and also look at the various personal allowances associated with the tax classes. The German tax system recognizes that individual circumstances for taxpayers may make it inequitable to apply the same tax procedure to everyone. One way of achieving this is to allow for setting deductions in income before taxes are calculated to take care of the different individual circumstances. Germany decided to achieve this through tax classes, taking into account factors like marital status, family circumstances, and disability status. Through this, taxpayers with similar financial circumstances and life circumstances, I must say, are grouped together in the same tax class, ensuring fairness in the process. And so comes the 6 tax classes in Germany. The primary grouping characteristics being marital status and whether or not one has children living with them in the household. Those are the 2 factors determining what tax class one falls in. As mentioned earlier, personal allowances are attached to various tax classes. And since these allowances reduce the income that is subject to income tax, this automatically influences the amount of tax one pays at the end of the day. Now let's look at each tax class, which taxpayers are grouped into each of them, the allowances pertaining to each of them, and those allowances that cut across all the tax classes. Tax class 1 includes employees who are single, widowed, or divorced. Also, married persons who live continuously separated from their spouse or life partner, or whose spouse or life partner lives abroad. For the widowed, the change to tax class 1 takes effect after the year following the year of the death of the deceased spouse. I will explain more on this under tax class 3. All the taxpayers who otherwise fall under tax class 1 but live with children in their household fall into tax class 2. So if you are single with a child, if you are divorced with a child, if you are widowed with a child and so forth, you will be in tax class 2 instead of tax class 1. Married employees who do not live continuously separated from each other and are both subject to unlimited income tax in Germany fall into tax class 3. I mentioned about unlimited income taxes and limited income taxes in one of the previous episodes. Please do watch that if you are confused about this section. Additionally, the spouse must either be unemployed or be an employee in tax class 5. As already mentioned, in the year following the year after the other spouse is deceased, the widowed will be tax class 1 or 2 if they live with children. However, in the year the spouse passed away and the year immediately following this, the surviving spouse will be tax class 3 only, and if and only if both spouses live together in Germany at the time of the death of the deceased spouse. That means if both spouses were in Germany but lived separately from each other, or one spouse lived outside of Germany, the surviving spouse will be placed in tax class 1 or 2, as the case may be. For example, if both spouses live together in Germany and one passed away in 2021, the surviving spouse will be in tax class 3 in 2021 and 2022, but be switched to tax class 2 or 1 in 2023. Grouped in tax class 4 are married employees like those in tax class 3, but with both working. Given the nature of this tax class, it is usually selected by married employees who have similar levels of income. A subclass here is the ability to choose tax class 4 with a factor method. I would prefer not to go into the details of this one because I think it's an unnecessarily complicated addition to the tax classification system. But for those who may be interested in knowing more about what tax class 4 with factor method means, I will leave a link below in the description section and you can check it out when you have the time availability. Tax class 5 only applies to married individuals whose spouse is already in tax class 3, just like we saw earlier. This implies that for qualified married employees, they have the option to choose between 3 combinations for tax class. Either tax class 3 and 5, 4 and 4, or 4 and 4 with the factor method. So for your first employment relationship, you can be classified into either of the first 5 tax classes that we've just discussed. Yeah, you can also have a mini job for which you pay no income tax. You can also have a short-term employment for up to 70 days per year, and there is a particular taxation mechanism around such short-term jobs. We will not go into that detail, but let's assume that for those short-term employment, you will also be taxed normally according to your normal tax class. If you have any other employment relationship that cannot be classified as any of these 3, so normal employment from tax class 1 to 5, or a mini job, or a short-term employment, the income from this other employment will be taxed under class 6. So those are the 6 tax classes currently applicable in Germany. Apart from married employees, where you fall, which tax class you fall into is a matter of law. It's a given. It's only married employees who live together in a household who have the option to choose between which tax class they would prefer. Really, at the end of the day, which tax class you choose, yes, makes some kind of difference on a month-to-month basis. But at the end of the year, if you were to file your taxes, then it doesn't make much of a difference. The advantage of choosing, for instance, for a married couple where one earns higher than the other, the advantage of choosing a 3 and 5 tax class combination is that on a monthly basis, the take-home income of the entire household, so when you add the man's net income to the woman's net income, it will be higher if they are tax class 3 and 5 than if they were tax class 4 and 4, for instance. However, at the end of the financial year, at the end of the calendar year, when they are supposed to file their taxes, when they file their taxes, what the Finanzamt does is to calculate their actual payable tax. And the Finanzamt does this by basically calculating the taxable income of both couples and then adding the taxable incomes together to determine one income for the household, and then tax is applied on that. It is the tax payable that comes out of this process that is then compared to what or how much tax both employees or both household members have paid. If what they have paid is more than what they should pay, then they get a tax refund. If what they have paid is less than what they should pay, then they have to pay more, the difference between the two, back to the Finanzamt or back to the government. And so again, at the end of the day, it doesn't make much of a difference, just that from month to month, you get more breathing room if one earns more than the other and you choose tax class 3 and 5. The current federal coalition government included in their coalition agreement to abolish tax classes 3 and 5 in favor of tax class 4 and 4 with a factor procedure. I am not a fan of this proposal, and I hope it doesn't get implemented. When it comes to switching between tax classes by married employees, this can now be done more than once a year within a calendar year, right? Before 2020, they were allowed to change tax classes once every year. Also, since 2018, only one spouse can apply to get their tax class changed. I hope this was clear enough for all those who are intimidated by the tax class process in Germany. Please continue this episode by watching part 2, linked at the end of this video here. If you found this useful, if you found this episode useful, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button, like and share with others. Tschüss und bis zum nächsten Mal.